Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're doing something a little different. We're kind of inspired by how a really good podcast can take complex stuff and, make it something you can actually use.
hmm
You, our listener, sent in this fascinating book, Somatic Therapy for Trauma by Joy Devereaux.
Yeah, a really interesting source.
And we thought, okay, let's look at the principles that make a podcast engaging, the ones that summarize big ideas really well and give you practical takeaways.
Right. How can those principles help us, or rather help you, understand and maybe even apply these somatic therapy ideas for your own personal growth?
Exactly. So our mission today is basically to see how Devereaux's book uses elements like, say, engaging summaries, practical tips, interaction,
hmm
things that make info stick.
And how that relates to maybe integrating some of these somatic practices into your daily life using the book as our guide.
Okay, let's dive in then. First up, engaging summaries. A great book summary podcast really nails this getting to the heart of the matter quickly.
Yeah, without getting bogged down.
And Devereaux seems to do this pretty well right at the start with somatic therapy itself. She calls it a body-centered approach.
Body-centered healing.
Right. And explains that trauma isn't just in your head, it leaves a physical imprint.
That's a key framing device right there.
Yeah.
It immediately shifts your perspective, doesn't it? Like a podcast grabbing you with a core insight.
Totally. And then she lays out the goals pretty clearly,
Mm.
like better emotional regulation
Stronger mind-body connection.
and more self-nurturing, self-care. It's very direct.
Yeah.
What do you think makes that kind of summary work?
Well, I think it's that reframing, like I said. Highlighting the physical aspect offers a different way in, and it builds a foundation. You need those basic definitions to understand what follows.
Okay.
And she also has these little reflection activity prompts scattered through the book. They sort of act like mini self-summaries, making you pause and process.
Ah, right. Like forcing you to recap in your own head.
Exactly. Active
Yeah.
engagement.
Okay, so summaries are one thing. But another key element is practical insights. Those aha moments where you think, oh, I can actually use this.
And this book is absolutely packed with those entire sections on practical applications for everyday life.
Yeah, like using body signals, somatic markers for decisions, managing stress at home or work,
Hmm.
even improving sleep.
This is where it moves firmly from theory into like tangible tools you can try. Devereaux gets really specific.
How so?
Well, she details grounding techniques, really feeling your weight, your feet on the floor, or that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 sensory thing.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. Notice 5 things you see, 4 things you feel.
Exactly that. And then there's resourcing, visualization, creating a safe space in your mind, finding an inner resource. Progressive muscle relaxation, gentle movement, like you mentioned earlier, maybe dance body scans, self-massage, and a whole bunch of breathing techniques.
And she explains why you do each one, right? Like grounding helps you feel stable, visualization builds resilience.
Precisely. It connects the how-to with the why-to. It's not just a list of exercises, it's explaining the intended benefit, which is way more motivating, like a podcast showing you how the info applies.
Yeah, definitely. What stood out to you in terms of those practical bits?
I think the inclusion of micro practices is really smart.
Because life is busy.
Totally. It acknowledges that reality, suggesting that even, tiny, consistent actions can make a difference. That makes it feel less overwhelming, more achievable.
Good point. It's about accessibility. Like a podcast giving you quick wins you can implement right away.
Exactly. Breaking it down.
So building on making it practical, let's talk interactivity.
Yeah.
How does a book, which is usually a one-way street, encourage engagement?
Well, Devereaux is quite explicit about it. She actually says things like, I encourage you to engage actively. Try the exercises, reflect.
So she directly invites you in.
Yeah. And those reflection activity prompts we talked about, that's direct engagement right there. It makes you an active participant.
It's not just passive reading.
Not at all. And even little things, like she includes a QR code for leaving a review.
Ah, okay. Like asking for listener feedback.
Sort of, yeah. It creates a feedback loop, a sense of connection, even though it's asynchronous. It mirrors how a podcast might use surveys or ask for topic ideas.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the overall structure, how the information flows? A good podcast usually has a clear path, right? Intro, main points, takeaways, maybe some memorable quotes, conclusion.
Absolutely. And Devereaux's book follows a really logical progression. It doesn't just jump into techniques.
How does it start?
It lays the groundwork first, defines somatic therapy, talks about trauma's impact, explores the mind-body link, common trauma responses. It builds the why this approach might be effective.
So it builds the case first.
Exactly. Then it gets into the core techniques, how to tailor them, how they might fit with other therapies, even using tech.
And
Then it shifts to the longer view, building a daily practice, sustaining it, overcoming hurdles. It moves from understanding to doing to integrating it long term.
And she keeps it engaging within that structure.
Yeah, I think so. The transitions are pretty clear. And she weaves in personal stories and case examples, her own experience, Michael the veteran, Emily the social worker.
Right. Those make it much more relatable, don't they? Like stories in a podcast episode.
Definitely brings it to life. And if you map it to that podcast structure you mentioned, intro, summary, practical points, quotes, conclusion, you can see parallels.
How so?
Well, the early definitions are the key summary. The huge focus on techniques and applications is the practical points. She does weave in quotes from people like Peter Levine, Gabor Mate.
Ah, the iconic quotes element.
Kind of, yeah. Not a separate section, but they're there. And each chapter and the whole book has a clear wrap-up, a conclusion.
And visually too, right? Headings, bullet points.
Absolutely. Headings, subheadings, bold text, lists. They all break up the text and make it easier to navigate. It contributes to a more dynamic reading experience, much like good show notes for a podcast.
Mm. Something else that struck me, which really links back to our idea of this deep dive being tailored to your source, is Devereaux's focus on personalization.
Yes, that's a huge theme. There's a whole section on tailoring practices to individual needs and a chapter dedicated to adapting somatic therapy for specific trauma types.
Like childhood trauma, PTSD.
Right. Complex trauma, physical, sexual, relationship trauma. It really hammers home that healing isn't one size fits all.
Which is like this conversation we're focused on this book because you sent it in. It's personalized.
Exactly. She encourages you, the reader, to assess your own triggers, your comfort levels, what actually resonates with you when you're choosing or modifying techniques. It's empowering.
Okay, so you've got the techniques, you're tailoring them.
Yeah.
What about sticking with it? The long game. How does the book address that? Because a podcast wants you to keep listening, right? Keep growing.
Definitely. Devereaux puts a lot of emphasis on building a sustainable practice. There are sections on developing a daily routine, maintaining it over time.
Tips on how to actually do that.
Lots of them. Start small, be consistent, maybe use habit stacking, linking it to something you already do. Find a balance, listen to your body, make it enjoyable if possible.
That sounds like solid advice for any habit change.
It is. And also tracking progress, celebrating small wins, being patient, knowing it's okay to have setbacks, and seeking support. It's about fostering that long-term engagement with your own well-being.
Very much like how a podcast aims to provide ongoing value.
Yeah, it's not presented as a quick fix.
And finally, she even touches on technology and further learning. That reminds me of show notes linking out to more resources.
Right. There's a chapter on using tech apps, wearables, even VR to enhance practice, and a big resource section at the end.
What's in there?
Lists of leaders in the field, advanced methods to explore, even specific search terms for YouTube. It gives you clear pathways if you want to go deeper.
So it really is quite striking how these principles we see in effective podcasts, the clear summaries, the practical applications, the interactivity, the structure, the personalization, the focus on long-term engagement, they're all mirrored in how Devereaux presents somatic therapy in this book.
Absolutely. And understanding that for you, the listener, can be really valuable. It helps you see how information is being made accessible and actionable.
Yeah, it helps you maybe evaluate other self-help resources you come across. Are they just presenting info, or are they actually helping you engage with it?
Exactly. It helps you identify what works for you in terms of learning and integrating new practices.
That is a powerful takeaway. It makes you think, doesn't it? How other ways of sharing knowledge, especially around well-being, could maybe learn from this. Make complex stuff easier to grasp and use.
And maybe that's the final thought for you to consider. How will you approach the next resource you encounter? Will you look for these elements, the clear summaries, the practical steps, the ways it encourages you to personalize it?
Yeah, maybe you'll be more attuned to whether it actually sets you up for success in applying the ideas.
Food for thought.
Definitely. Well, we encourage you to explore the resources Devereaux mentions if this resonates, and just reflect on how these principles might help your own learning journey, whatever the topic. Thanks for exploring this with us on The Deep Dive.